So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very, very warm welcome to this BA Community webinar. We're going to be talking about a really, really crucial topic in today's webinar. I would imagine everyone tuning in to this webinar has stakeholders of some description. And there's always a good discussion about how we engage with stakeholders, how we analyze them. And we're probably all familiar with the traditional grid or the RACI matrix, but there are so many other techniques above and beyond that. So we're going to be taking a really fresh look at stakeholder analysis, stakeholder engagement, from a really fun angle, the angle of hitchhiking. So I'm really pleased to introduce Elizaveta. Elizaveta is an ICT business analyst with over 8 years of experience in a whole range of different projects, whether that's web, desktop, mobile, Internet of Things. She's a wide range of experience in different domains, outsourcing companies, and a whole range of different geographies as well, which we'll hear about in the presentation today. So Elizaveta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
You are most welcome. And just before we kick off, please do, if you're attending live, do say hello in the chat, because of course you can chat to each other in the chat as we go along. I see we've got people from Warwickshire, Hampshire, Glasgow, South Africa. So we've got UK and South Africa so far, and London. So let's see how international we are today. Oh, Canada, BC, British Columbia and Canada. Fantastic. Cincinnati, Ohio. With that in mind, I just want to share a link in the chat. And I'm just going to put a mural link in here. And I'll bring this up on the screen. And those of you that have been on these webinars before will know how this works. So I've just put a mural link in the chat, and you should be seeing that mural link on the screen now. And I see some of you have joined the board already. And first of all, you'll see it, like you'll need to zoom in, and you'll see that, first of all, on the right-hand side, you can connect with Elizaveta directly there. Elizaveta is going to share some really, really great links or some great resources. There are additional links on there, so you can go straight on there when she's talking. And also, it's a shared board where when you hear something that's really useful, that you think, yeah, that's something I want to take away, just double click, and you just double click on there and put, this technique, blah, 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 blah. And you can be as creative as you like, and you can color code it or whatever. And what I'll do is I'll share this mural board as a PDF after the event. So really, really fun way to do some collective note taking. We will be taking questions and answers towards the end of the presentation, so feel free to chat amongst amongst yourselves in the chat window. And if you've got questions, it's really, really helpful if you put them in the Q&A tab, because that way I can separate them out. I'll try and capture any questions that you have in the chat window as well. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Elizaveta to talk about a hitchhiker's guide to stakeholder management. So Elizaveta, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just start sharing my screen. So our road today is fueled by black metrics, and the road and the fuel is an Adrian. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Our main road will take about 60 minutes, so this is our limit for today. And navigation and some pit stops for questions and answers will be on me. And before we go on any journey, it's good to look at the map where we're going. So I will start with a brief introduction, then we go to comparison of hitchhikers and business analysts. Then we, of course, check who are stakeholders and why we shall manage them at all. Then we will go to our main roads with stakeholder management options. Then I will share some inspiration and resources, and we will finish with questions and answers. And important thing to note about this mural board is that today it already has all the links that I included into this presentation. So if you know more links, please share them on the board, because one of the main things in hitchhiking and in business analysis is to share the knowledge, because maybe you haven't been somewhere, but you know someone who traveled to a particular place and they can share their experience. So let's go to introduction. Here am I on this photo, hitchhiking in 2012, somewhere in Austria. And today it's a bit of nostalgia. I'm wearing the same sweater, which I wear to their days. It's as good as new, maybe a bit smaller, feels on me, but still it's good. And it brings me that road spirit that, okay, we're on a journey together again. So I've been through different projects because I've mostly been working as an outsourced business analyst. So I have stakeholders who are outside my company, and development team is actually the people within my company. So with this perspective, all the processes, all the applications that I have helped to create, they were outside of my organization mostly. So again, I had to learn every new domain through the eyes of my stakeholders, through their experience. And after some time, I realized that this hitchhiking experience that I gained through traveling and through communication with different drivers, different people in different places, that helped me to find the ways of communicating with people from different countries, different backgrounds. And I hope that today I can share some of this experience. Definitely, I'm not like the awarded expert. I'm just the traveler who has been to some places and who is ready to share some tips which I've learned on my way. So let's go to hitchhiking and BAs. Like, hitchhiking is the act of traveling by obtaining free lifts on motor vehicles. The most popular thing in hitchhiking is to get a car. You just go to the road, you just put the thumb up. In some countries, there are other like hand gestures, but in Europe, mostly this one. And you just get on a car, explain to the driver that you're a hitchhiker, and here you go. And it's not the only way. Some people hitchhiked even on boats. I've never tried that, but who knows, maybe it's possible. No, it's definitely possible, but I have never been there. And business analysts, people who perform business analysis tasks described in BA book. So some may ask, what are the common things among these two people? And these all activities, hitchhiking and business analysis, they include communication, tons of communication on daily basis. And through this communication, we're really similar in the way that we cannot go this journey on our own. BAs do not exist in vacuum. We always need our development teams or our stakeholders or our companies in which we operate. As a hitchhikers do not exist without cars. They do not exist without roads. So we all connected with our stakeholders in the way to reach our destinations and reach our goals. Sometimes they are the same, sometimes they're slightly different, but if they're at least in the common direction, you can go. For example, in hitchhiking, when you go somewhere far away from your home, you do not get there in one car. It's almost impossible. If it's a travel like more than 100 kilometers, you will change several cars. And not every stakeholder will go to the very place that you're going. They will just be passing by or driving somewhere nearby. And even this bit of road they can share with you and give you a lift. So what are the common things or different things that hitchhikers and business analysts do? Like, both hitchhikers and business analysts have to be bright and noticeable, because we all have to highlight it somewhere that, guys, we're here, we exist, like we need your attention. Hitchhikers can wear bright clothes, like we can have some boards with the location name so that it's easier for drivers to understand, okay, if they can't pick up us or if they are just turning the next turn and it's just the mess of time. And for business analysts, if our stakeholders don't know about our existence, then they will never contact us. So we have to highlight from the very start of the project, from the very start of our communication, that we are here and this is how we are reachable: phone, email, whatever. The next thing is that we have to find ways to communicate. In hitchhiking, when you travel abroad, you don't always necessarily speak the driver's language. For example, I traveled in Poland, in Switzerland, in Austria. I don't speak Polish really well. I can understand it a little bit, but I can speak Belarusian, and with some like practice, I can really catch up some Polish phrases at bare minimum. Or in Czech Republic, they have really tricky words because they are different from my language. Like the same word can be with a totally opposite meaning, which is tricky, especially when you're traveling. So again, you have to find the ways to communicate, to explain that you're a foreigner, that, okay, please be tolerant to my accent, pronunciation, anything. And as business analysts, we always have to find ways how to communicate, better via emails, better via diagrams, better verbally via calls, what our stakeholders like better. Of course, in the professional environment, we usually speak one language, like English or any other. But again, we have to avoid any slang or too technical terms if we're talking to our business stakeholders, because they may not understand us and all this will be too complicated. One thing is completely different in hitchhiker's world and business analyst world is cooperation. When you hitchhike, if car stops and you feel not comfortable getting into the car, you just never do that. You just politely explain, thank you very much for your time, wish you a nice road, and you just don't get into the car. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, in professional environment, we don't have any extreme situations when you really cannot communicate with your stakeholder, or as a business analyst, you just cannot say, okay, I don't like this guy, I won't talk to him. It's almost impossible. So you have to find a way to communicate, but with some precautions. You have to keep in mind that, okay, if you have this first impression that something can go wrong, then you have to be even more polite or careful or attentive. Next thing, we have to appreciate stakeholders' experience. Again, drivers, especially if they're locals, they know better. And in business analysis world, if I'm working with, let's say, lawyers or flight safety experts, I would never be better than they in their own field, in their own business. I've worked with people who are brilliant accountants, but computer for them is this terrible machine. What you are giving to me, I hate it. But I would never be this right accountant. So I shall be careful and have to be patient to explain what I'm doing, why I'm automating something, and how it can improve the stakeholder life. And in hitchhiking, it was a thing when I was traveling in Ukraine, in the Carpathy Mountains, and I was feeling like disappointed because with my boyfriend, we didn't have enough time, like enough days in our travel to visit a particular waterfall. It's cheap, maybe someone knows, it's big one, it's beautiful, but we just didn't have time. And we were like hitchhiking on the way back home, like knowing, okay, we have only a couple of days. And then driver stopped and we told him about our feelings. And he said, guys, if you stay here just for one more day, like 5 kilometers this direction, or even on foot, you can reach it. There is a lake and there is a small waterfall, like a compensation for that missed one. The location was excellent. We blessed that driver several times. We would never see him again, probably, but that advice that he gave us was amazing. That place was so beautiful that we still remember that location. And that's it. we didn't have like any Googles, and we used paper maps at that time. So there was no other way that we learn about this waterfall. So our stakeholders know their place, their area better. So if we appreciate that, it will be fantastic. Also, we have to adjust communication style, because some drivers prefer to talk. Some drivers prefer to listen, the same as our stakeholders. Sometimes I remember that my stakeholders just needed someone to talk to. Okay, I've spent like hour or two listening to them. After that, we just sorted out all the things in 15 minutes. Yes, sometimes it's not possible to invest so much time, but if you have this opportunity, it can be really helpful, because you're just building the trust. And speaking about listening or talking, again, in hitchhiking, I had a case when a truck driver stopped and picked me and my boyfriend. And driver said, "Guys, I'm really tired. I haven't slept well. I have to drive 300 or 400 kilometers, and I'm falling asleep. Literally, I'm falling asleep, and I cannot listen to music because I'm still falling asleep. Like my eyes are open, but I do not control myself. So talk to me and like claim reaction." And with all the speed limits, that journey took us about 4.5, 5 hours. I never thought that I can speak and talk for 5 hours straight. My boyfriend is not a very talkative person, so it was my challenge. I wanted to get to my destination alive, so I talked. That was a really good practice of finding new topics and asking for feedback and communicating something, and then listening attentively, catching some phrases, and do this active listening techniques so that driver really be engaged into this conversation. That was challenging. Also, we have to check the road on our own. As business analysts, yeah, we can create with our project managers or by ourselves perfect roadmaps, wonderful plans, everything, but we cannot just hang them somewhere, pinned to a board and forget. We have to always check if we are going to the right direction, because again, circumstances are changing, people are changing, their motivation is changing. And once we were hitchhiking, it was late evening, and it was again a big truck driver. He was sleepy, usually sleepy for some reason, and he took the wrong turn. Again, it was 2011 when we didn't have smartphones. We had only paper maps. And after several kilometers, my boyfriend noticed that the road signs are not the expected ones. He noticed that we were not on the way we should be. And that was the thing that, okay, something have to be done. And he provided the feedback. He said, "I'm sure you know the road, but I'm a bit confused. I see different sides. Maybe we're in the wrong road." Like, first try wasn't successful. Driver said, "Come on, I grew up here, I know every road and path here." But after like again several kilometers, the driver realized that, "Guys, I don't know where we are." That was hilarious. It was 11 p.m. It was quite dark, but in the end, together we managed to find the way. We reached our destination, but again, we noticed on time that, okay, something is not right. We provided the feedback, not like any claim, let's say, but again, our observation, and driver found the way. And also, we as business analysts, as people from a different mindset, from a different perspective, we have to help our stakeholders to find something new, even in the familiar things, because what is obvious and routine for them can be something new and exciting for us. And again, driver who was giving us a lift in Carpathy Mountains. He was born in Mukachevo, but we were going to a castle in Chinadiva. It's a nearby town. He said, "What? The castle in Chinadiva? I've never heard about this. There's nothing there." But we said, no, we've read this on the internet, so this is like the location. So a day later, we arrived in Mukachevo and we met the driver, and we gave him the photos, gave him some postcards. He was amazed. He was surprised. And he said, "Oh, guys, I will go there next day because it's interesting. You showed me something that I've never known." So again, in all this routine work that we do as business analysts, we have to find the pieces which are not clear to us and highlight it to stakeholders, because sometimes they just think that it's clear. But I was on a business trip in the UK, and we were trying to figure out some automation for flight safety system. And we realized that two departments use the same term, but in the end, it appeared that they meant absolutely different things. Without my stupid questions at first, like what, how, why, what does it mean? For them, it was obvious. For me, it was not at all, because I was an absolute newcomer in that area. And through my questions, they started double checking with one another. They started thinking, okay, maybe she doesn't understand something because something is not right. In the end, we realized that it was just the same term used for absolutely two different entities, and it prevented us from big overwork or rebuild of the system, just because at the very beginning we asked a lot of questions with my colleagues. So let's go to stakeholders. I've been talking about drivers over and over again, but in our world as business analysts, we may have stakeholders as drivers or drivers as stakeholders, but usually they're people who have any interest in our company or organization affairs, like in our project. And sometimes I even see the definitions that stakeholders could be companies and organizations that are interested in our project or product or system, anything, or who can influence our system in some way. Maybe they really don't care about our mobile application, but their regulations, let's say Apple Store policies, they will influence our publishing schedule, just because on Christmas, they have these vacations and they do not accept any new submissions. So we have to plan our new versions so that we give them for review in advance before Christmas, so that our clients get their applications on time. And there are a variety of definitions of what categories or types of stakeholders exist. They like these two groups are just the examples that I found. The link is shared in useful resources on the Mir board. And again, I see that even when we list 10 different types of stakeholders, we always can find the 11th and 12th. So it's a constantly changing list. For some projects, there could be only 3 of them. For some projects, there could be 20 of them. So as business analysts, we always have to be careful and double check everyone and everything. So now, well, we're finished with all the stakeholders, with all the hitchhikers definitions. Let's go to our main road. How do we manage stakeholders? Let's start with stakeholders list. Yeah, this is the most obvious one. And this is the example of a table which I usually use, because sometimes you can see just name and title, contact details, and communication way. For me, it's also important to know the area of experience, maybe not necessarily the role on the project and the power that the stakeholder has, but what they can share with me. Like, okay, if I need some bias documentation, who can help me? Or if I need some safety instructions, where I should go. Location and time zone, Again, it depends on the project. In my cases, I usually have stakeholders in different locations. So when I arrange meetings, I have to know what's the time for every stakeholder. So I usually include this information so that I don't wake them up in the middle of night. And also you usually put into the table the level of the authority, influence, interest, and impact, because later it's easier to visualize their influence on the project if I need. And even while I'm writing this, I realize, okay, this is clear to me that this person is the main one, he or she can do this or that, and this level of power. But for some people, I don't know. So it means that I have to clarify this piece of information together with all the requirements, all the software details. I have to understand if this person is powerful enough to block any decisions, or if this person is tremendously affected by my system, and maybe I should just check, okay, what's your opinion and how the things shall work for you better. So it's an obvious tool, but even with this one, we can get to good results. RACI matrix is the holy grail of our stakeholders management, and I won't stop this too much because even in BA BOK we have excellent examples, and this topic has been covered for hundreds of times. So it exists, we use it. The main thing maybe to note is that it doesn't work by itself. Even if it's written, it doesn't magically work. You always have to double check that people know where it is, that people understand why it is defined, and that people follow the agreements. Otherwise, it will be just another table. Stakeholders matrix. This one is from BA BOK 3rd edition, and it's really good. I like it. And it's simple to convert my table into this matrix because I already know the level of influence and impact of my stakeholders. Also, I've seen the options where people add the attitude, like accept of power and interest. They add this like emotional attachment, like, okay, this person is positive or skeptical or something like that. So this is also a nice way to highlight what are your stakeholders. So you just add in the dimension. Some sources provide this variation of stakeholders matrix. They also include to this matrix the information of how to communicate, so that you don't have it as a separate list, but okay, for these people you give just links to articles, for these people you use some quick polls, okay, for these people you create any tool, you use any tools to co-create documents because they are really engaged, they're really helpful. Or maybe some people you include on risk registers, or maybe invite them to join you in this risk register review, let's say. And again, the link to the source is already shared, so you can go and check on by yourself. It's really nice technique. I haven't tried it, but it looks like, okay, if I put all the people from my project to this stakeholders matrix, wow, it looks nice. Another thing that I've noticed is that some people use stakeholders cube. So again, it's a 3-dimensional representation of all our stakeholders, and they have even some titles like who is your time bomb, who's influential but passive and can block solutions. So you have to be really cautious with those people. But again, you could have a sleeping giant, really influential person who's passive for some time, but this person will support your project, will support your options. And this is the person to keep in mind when you have some hard discussions. And this is the person who can help you, who can promote the change within the organization or anything like that. And speaking of all these options, I just again remember about my experience at hitchhiking, because you cannot visit all the places, but people who've been there, like who shared the information through any posts or any resources, you can get something from there. Let's say okay, in this country, it's better to hitchhike closer to the motorways because it's allowed to hitchhike on motorways, so you can go there and cars going faster there. In this country, you cannot go on motorways, so maybe it's easier to hitchhike at petrol stations where they have the place to stop, to notice you, and something like that. So again, with all those matrices and cubes, you can try them, or you can review the other people's feedback and then see if it's suitable for you. Also, there are some stakeholder interaction matrix. They again separate our stakeholders in different groups and define what to do with them, how to communicate, and how you provide the content for them, if it's summaries or if it's like very detailed updates, or it's just mid-level summary with some overall descriptions. Also, engagement metrics. It is very similar to RACI matrix, but it describes mostly the attitude of your stakeholders. And you can highlight if it's the current situation, like with C on this table, or with desired, like, okay, currently your stakeholder is unaware about your existence, for example, as a business analyst, but you would like to get support from this person. So you want to make this stakeholder a supportive one. Or someone is neutral and for you it's okay, and you just would like to keep it this way and maybe just inform this stakeholder about some updates. Also, stakeholders onion diagram, when I first tried it, it was really confusing to me because this one is focusing on the solution rather than on organization. But me being an outsourced business analyst and the solution is already outside my organization, it belongs to the client. So it was a mind blower. In the end, when with my colleague, we sorted our stakeholders according to this diagram, we understood like, okay, who will actually use our solution within our client's organization, who will be affected by the outcomes, and all these involved people or partially involved people, and even organizations which regulate the business of this company. So it's really a reflection look on at least outsourced projects. Personas. Usually we speak about personas when we speak about user management or user experience or UI design. But if we have really influential stakeholders, or if on some projects, as I had a stakeholder who is really the power of everything, then we have to know this person better. We have to understand the background, the motivation, the personality, to know how to better present the information visually, like in just plain text, or maybe they prefer oral communication. And all these tiny details really suitable for persona of the stakeholders. Surely it's not suitable for creating personas for all the stakeholders if you have like 20 of them, but for the key one, why not? And the one which I cannot emphasize more is created by Kathy Burkish. It's Stakeholder Engagement Canvas. She has posted this on LinkedIn. Please take a look. It's amazing. It really structures your way of understanding stakeholders through all the different perspectives. And I've never analyzed drivers during my hitchhiking, but if I need, I know what tool to use. It's really a full scale analysis of your stakeholder and how to engage them into your activities. And for some people, for some BAs, dealing with stakeholders on their software projects can be a thing. Just because you can have a developer who doesn't want to do anything unless all the designs are perfectly ready. Sometimes you just don't have time for perfectly ready designs. You just have to deal with what you have. Check the previous screens. They have similar buttons, just reuse them and write the different name. That's it. And on this web side, it's really great that they highlight, okay, this is the type of a difficult stakeholder, these are the consequences that can happen, and these are the tools or techniques how to overcome the difficulties. So highly recommend. And what can go wrong when we prepare our stakeholders to work with us? They can have lack of awareness of what the changes are about, like on the crossroads where you have no priority signs and nobody just knows what to do first. They may have resistance to change. They just repeatedly work in their circles. They don't want to go anywhere. They could have lack of perception of roles or lack of acquaintance or relationship. So for the first thing, we have to set the right picture and magnitude, why it's important, what we are going to do. And again, the source from where I took this information is in the link, and it's really helpful. It is really helpful because it has the links to the direct techniques from BA book. So when you just thinking about how to set the right picture, okay, metrics, KPIs, prototyping, maybe root cause analysis, like check this link, and it has really good example of what to do with everything. You can handle the resistance to change by just working closely with the stakeholders, explaining to them, okay, this is the change. Maybe it's like unclear to you now, but this is how it make your life easier. We always have to set expectations and roles with all the techniques that mentioned previously. Matrices, lists, stakeholder analysis. This is what help us to define expectations and define roles. And building relationships. If you have an option, you can have a quick lunch together. During the pandemic, it's not the case, but maybe you can find some time for a bit of extended small talk, which is like a medium talk, to discuss something and find the common ground. Also, we have to be cautious about BA-dependent demotivators, because sometimes people, as BAs, we want to be focused, we want to be precise, we want to be on time, and we may act like a clock or like a machine, like, okay, this 10 minutes for this topic, 10 minutes for next topic. I don't care if you don't catch up. So something like that, next topic. And our stakeholders can feel lost. So again, empathy, attention to our own behavior to see, okay, if everyone is on the same page with us. And what we can do with all those demotivators and loss of attention, we have to describe the ground rules, like here we did at the beginning, like how much time we have in total, like who's responsible for what, like where to find the mirror board, where to write the questions. All this is, again, some ground rules. Again, we can use activities to keep stakeholders active and alert. We can, let's say, brainstorm, or we can use collaborative games, or we can use process modeling. For some people who are visuals, they really appreciate that. And sometimes I just used like unicorns in my serious business presentation, and stakeholder, he appreciated that because he said, okay, yeah, this is the magic place. Like this is the most complicated part of the system where magic happens. Okay, unicorns, they're jumping there. Nobody knows how it should work, but okay, we understand that this area requires our attention. Also, stakeholders can have troubles with navigating through all our technical solutions and these abstract concepts like databases or relations of entities, or something very complex like cryptographic algorithms. So if we can, we shall use illustration or simplification to help our business stakeholders understand some technical things if they need to. So we are like entrepreneurs, but from the context level. So we just have to show. And if you can draw it, you really can understand it yourself. If it's difficult for you to draw it, then maybe you have to really double check your knowledge because it's really complicated. And also, if the people have lack of clarity or expectations, we have to do it on every call with our client, on every email. We have to really clearly state what do we want from our stakeholders. If we're writing an email just to say hello, if we're writing an email just to give an update, or if we want something in turn, like as a reply. This is very important because sometimes I noticed that when I was younger, I was writing emails and it was really hard to find what I was wanting. But nowadays I'm trying to use like questions or anything like that as bullet points that they're visually clear. Okay, this is what I want. And all the things are there in the email, they're just additional information or maybe some greetings. And main reason for changes, what can happen during your journey? In hitchhiking, driver, if they have big cars, they can pick up more stakeholders. They can pick up more hitchhikers. And what I remember is that every time you have to introduce, check where everyone's going, how they feel, everything like that. The same we do at our work. If we have a new person coming, we have to double check if they're aware what's going on. We have to introduce ourselves, we have to learn their names, and we have to understand like if we are all on the same page, going into the direction which is suitable for everyone. When we change the stakeholders, when we change the car, I can hardly imagine a hitchhiking where just, okay, I traveled with one driver, left it, and just jumped to the next car as if we have been traveling the whole road together. No way. We have to again introduce, explain where we're going, why we're going where, who we are, what is hitchhiking business analysis, what is the project about, where we are going, why we are going there. And we can ask from the driver or from our stakeholders, what are your expectations? Because not every stakeholder can know what business analysis is or what is hitchhiking. Some people were like surprised to know that, okay, hitchhiking is for free. Okay, so you won't pay me money, right? Okay, so it's just for conversations. All right. So this is the same as we work. We have to set clear expectations with every new stakeholder. Next thing is when something changes. The road change, you have to take the different roads, you have some speed limits, wind changes, whatever. Again, you see that something is changing on the project timeline, budget. It has to be communicated with stakeholders again and again so that you're sure that you're on the same page. Or if current agreements do not work, for example, you agreed to have a call every week, like on Wednesday, but they don't come up or something like that. You have to clarify what's going on, like why they use this road instead of that one, and communicate your concerns. Like don't keep silence. Sometimes it's like obvious reasons for your stakeholders not to come up. You can just show some compassion and they will pay in turn. They will come on another day, early, later, and everything will work. And one thing that I want to check today is, Adrian, maybe you can help me, is that how different backgrounds can affect our like thinking, evaluation, and everything. So let's say I want to rent a house. So simple thing, I want to rent a house. Please write in the chat the number which is the closest to the house that you now imagined. I will open the chat to see, like, just put the number of the house which is closest to your imagination.
Lots of ones. Oh, a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, and 5 from Mindy. Mindy lives in a very, very diverse neighborhood, I think.
Amazing. So mostly 1. Wow, that's interesting because even 5. So okay, it's interesting that we have this majority of 1s, because previously when I tried this exercise with some other like let's say audience, I got 1 and 4 and 3, like and people like these houses are similar, but some people put 5, that okay, this is their house in their environment. This is what's common for them. So when we use this analogies in our work, like, okay, I want to build a house or rent a house, we have to understand if it's a apartment building with 7 floors or if it's like a 1-floor house. It's different. And in our business analysis, we can show this as example that, okay, we have to clarify the scope of our project with our stakeholders and understand what each term means to them, so that we don't have this, okay, I imagine house number 1, but we have been talking about house number 5. So let's move on. And one book that I really highly recommend is When Cultures Collide. There they have these descriptions of listening patterns in different cultures. Because, for example, in India and the United States, they speak English absolutely well. Like in both countries, they have really good level of English, but they have absolutely different approach of listening because of culture, because of some traditions, and you never can say that one is better or worse. They're just different. It's like different flowers or different like soups. And you have to be aware of the differences so that you communicate properly. Or even let's go closer, the United Kingdom and Germany, or even just if we go to the British part of the United Kingdom, you like some people in the United Kingdom like jokes, sarcasm, or something like that. Germans, they don't like it. They prefer more formal discussions at work. And these countries are really close on the map, but still they have these different approaches in conversations. So again, if we at least know about that, we will find it easier to communicate. So on the multicultural projects, especially when you have multicultural team, in addition to your different stakeholders, you have to like take into account all the cultural differences, all the like things that can interrupt your communication, and try to find the ways to overcome them and use all the resources possible. Visuals, calls, like some maybe informal calls. I used to do it with my team during the pandemic from different locations. We had some online team buildings, and it helped to keep the team spirit. And what is also important to remember is these biases and all the cultural differences, languages. And if we remember all those things on the spider web, then we can go into this multiverse of stakeholders and work with them successfully. So now we've passed our main road. We go to our inspiration and resources, and then we'll go to our questions and answers. So speaking about inspiration, the main one, maybe you noticed from the title, is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because it's an amazing book, great film, but the books are mind-blowing. And the first thing they mentioned there, don't panic. Really, I remember when I just started working as a business analyst, I was panicking really before calls with the client, before personal meetings with the client, I was nervous. If we can get rid of panic, we can go on and be successful. One of the best piece of advice ever, I would say. Next one. You can know what the question actually is. Like, if you know what the question is, then you can understand the answer. And this is what business analysis is all about. We have to be perfect at formulating questions, or maybe not perfect, but find new ways of asking the same thing again and again if we need clarifications, because we have to be inventive sometimes, not to sound repetitive, but still get to the very root cause of the problem, and don't overload our stakeholders. And next part, it's not directly related to business analysis or hitchhiking, but always remember, where's your towel? It's very important, because in the book, it was used for very different purposes. I personally keep this as a mental note, that you have to keep your workplace clean, your stakeholders list clean. If there are old stakeholders, you have to remove them. If there are new ones, you have to add them, and everything in order, and some blanket to polish some things. Other things, BA book, it's our holy book. When teams collide and when cultures collide, these books are really about managing and working on international teams. With all this remote working becoming more popular, they are really up to date. And what I like about When Cultures Collide, you just pick up the chapter about particular country. Yes, it's generalized, there are many exceptions, but overall, you can get the idea. So we have shared the links already. So let's go to questions and answers.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Elizaveta, for such a broad-ranging presentation. And I just want to take a very quick look at the mural just before we move on to questions and answers, because you probably haven't seen quite how many things there are on there, right? There are a lot of things. We've got stuff about personas, stakeholders. Oh, I'm moving the things around now. Building trust. So there's a lot of people have been getting a lot from your presentation, which is just amazing and fantastic.
That's great. That was the idea.
Yeah. So let's cover some questions. Lizzle asks, Lizzle says, I joined a company during lockdown, not working at a physical office, and I don't have a company organogram, so like an organizational chart that I can refer to. What would be a good way to make sure I have identified all of the stakeholders? So would you have any tips for identifying stakeholders?
Well, if you identified at least some of the stakeholders and you joined the company during the pandemic, the first thing I would go to the already identified stakeholders and ask if they have any organizational chart, maybe draft one, maybe not very up to date, but at least something that they already have. If they don't have it, then I would just really find some people who really working in this company for a long time, who know people and who point you to the right directions. Again, it may be not the perfect way of creating the stakeholders list and identifying all of them, but at least it will give you some directions where to dig, where to see. Because if, let's say, you know that there are several departments, you know the names of two of them, but the third one is a mystery, then it's better than not knowing at all that there is a third department.
Yeah, definitely. I love that idea as well of relying on expert knowledge, and it's almost like exploring sometimes, isn't it? You find one stakeholder and they help you find the other stakeholders. So Jason asks a really interesting question as well, which is, do you keep this stakeholder analysis local on your own computer, or do you share it with the full team? He goes on to say, I imagine some of the information about attitudes might be sensitive, and I struggle with how much to share with people. And just to add to that, to combine with that, another really interesting aspect that Lizzle adds is there are a few BAs working at the company, but in different domains. Would it make sense to have a shared stakeholder list or map? Or is it really meant to be project specific? So those two questions, if we like build them into one, is it sensible to share stuff that might be sensitive? And also, could you have a shared list, at least amongst a BA team? What would you think to that?
Well, the first part of the question is about what to share is really sensitive, and it depends on the project. If it's the project where I have really external stakeholders from another company, and we always have to understand why we're building this stakeholders list. If I need to present the stakeholders to my team, I will definitely share it with my team. If I want to engage stakeholders to also look at this list and understand who is responsible for what, I will write the description in the way that can be shared with all the involved people on the project, so that they all can see, okay, I treat them as an influencer, or like I don't use any like these nicknames, but again, I say, okay, this person has a high influence on the project, this person has low influence on the project. And let them validate, guys, if I'm right. And I formulate it in the way that, okay, it's my opinion, help me to validate it so that they don't feel any pressure or bias or something like that. But what I like personally do, mostly I share this with at least my development team, because they have to know for whom they are building the project. And I never keep stakeholders list to myself only, because this is important for at least project manager and for the rest of the team. And the second part is about the stakeholders list for the whole company. It depends, I believe, on, again, the purposes of this list. If you want to identify all the people in the company and their general level of power, maybe organizational chart is the way to go. Because when we speak about stakeholders list for a project, on different projects, different people will have different influence. For example, let's say in one department, you have the head of department as the owner of the project who has the veto right or something like that. But on the project for another department, the same powerful person will be just a subject matter expert on a particular topic without any power, without any decision-making authority. So, and if you want to put it all in one matrix, it could be really heavy to read.
It would be really big, very, very quickly. So fantastic. So then moving on to a question that Rushma asks, which I think is a question many people will have, which is how much time should be spent to creating these assets? Because of course, often there's a rush to get moving. So how much time would you normally spend?
On average, to create a detailed stakeholders map, if you have about 10, 15 stakeholders, the rough version takes an hour or two. The detailed one can take up to 4, 6, or 8 hours, depending on the level of your knowledge about the stakeholders, and if you have worked with them before or if you see them for the very first time in your life. And I wouldn't polish this artifact to perfection every day, but I just create it at the very beginning of the project. And if I join the project where there is no stakeholders list, this is the first thing I do.
Yeah.
Because when I don't know where to go, in terms of people, I'm blind as a business analyst. And some people say that, okay, I just remember everything in my mind. People get ill, people go on vacations. I do not trust something which is not written. Yes, I trust people, I trust their knowledge, but if it's something that has to be shared, it has to be shared visually, verbally, in written form somewhere.
Absolutely.
And if it's a half-year project without tremendous changes of stakeholders, it's usually within total maybe 2 or 3 days in half a year that you will dedicate to stakeholders list, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll take one final question. And so if you can, in 30 seconds or less, which is always a really hard thing to ask. But Michelle asks, or Michelle says, I'm thinking about the non-functionals, especially security. And how does Elizaveta keep safe when hitchhiking? So that's a really interesting question to finish on.
Well, being a girl, I never traveled alone by hitchhiking. I usually traveled with my boyfriend and then later husband. And through traveling, we understood what does it mean to overcome difficulties together. So it was a good testing of relationship. And again, it's this thing that I mentioned at the very beginning. It's your gut feeling. It's your awareness of the situation. And if you ever feel uncomfortable that, okay, this driver of the car, maybe the look and feel of the car, it doesn't feel right, or maybe you just saw that it was driving like a crazy man, just don't get into the car. There are thousands ways of politely decline the ride, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Well, Elizaveta, thank you so much for such a wonderful and rich presentation. There are people typing lovely messages into the chat as we speak. I'm sure people will want to stay in touch with you. They'll want to connect. I know you've got your email address and your LinkedIn address there. I'll just put your LinkedIn address in the chat as well. And what I would say is everyone tuned in live, like this is the point if this was a real world presentation where all of us would be clapping, right? So we should give Elizaveta a virtual round of applause. And a great way of doing that is by connecting on LinkedIn and saying thank you that way. And Elizaveta, if anyone has questions that we haven't been able to cover, are you happy for them to drop you a line and keep the conversation going?
Absolutely. Please reach me on LinkedIn or via email. You're welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you very much for your attention and really great questions. So I wish you safe rides and mutual understanding with your stakeholders, whoever they are.
Fantastic. And at that point, we will end the session. Thank you so much, Elizaveta. I'm sure we'll speak again soon. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in live. Do let your colleagues know about these webinars. They're free. You can find out more. I'll be sending you an email with links to other upcoming webinars as well. So do join in. But thanks once again, Elizaveta. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and stay safe. See you all soon. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.